Hello everyone, welcome back. This week I've been doing sewing. It's a shock. I decided to do just some sewing of patterns that someone else did, rather than doing any pattern drafting, just so I could get back into the joy of sewing something up quickly. So this week has been a week of quick makes, and the one that I was going to show you is this one, which is the Wanted top by Vanessa Pouzet, who is French. I don't know where that accent came from. And it's a stretch top, but it's got this nice square neckline, and the Fold Line reviewed it on their pattern review that they put up last week, and I saw it and thought, ooh, I like that. I think I might have to make it. I needed a couple of extra stretch tops anyway, because I don't have many, and the ones I do have are either a bit old now or made of fabric which is not warm in the slightest. So yes, I made this. This is from made from Fabrics Galore, that I bought at the Knitting and Stitching show last October. It is a stretch jersey, a cotton, and I think it's 95% cotton, 5% spandex, and it's in this obviously kind of brown and white stripe. It's quite hard to find stripe fabric that isn't black or grey or navy in some way, and this is the only one I've seen that was close to my colour palette, but I don't really wear bright white. And I'm still considering whether I might try and dim the white down a little bit, but I haven't done it yet. It's a really quick make, but because it is French, the pattern is in French. And if you put it into Google Translate, you get some quite exciting versions of what the pattern instructions should be telling you. So I thought as I made it, I would just record the process so that if you wanted to make it, you can refer to the video as well as the instructions, and hopefully that would allow you to put it together. It's very simple. The only bit that's a bit more complicated is doing the square neckline. Oh, I've spilled something on it. Oh, sorry about that. Shouldn't eat when just about to record. I don't know what that is actually. Oh, it might be oil. Anyway, so it's quite straightforward other than that, and it took a couple of hours to sew up, so it's very easy. You get it online, it's a PDF pattern. It is about €7, I think, to buy, so whatever that exchange rate is for you. For England at the moment, it's about £7, due to the joy of the exchange rate at the moment. And yeah, it's pretty quick, so I hope this is useful and you enjoy it. I also talk quite a lot about pattern matching and matching stripes, and that principle you could use in any pattern where you're using a stripe, so hopefully that's helpful for some of you as well. It's the way I do it. I've sort of developed it through trial and error, so I don't know whether this is an accepted mechanism, but it seems to work for me, so you know, that's good. So I hope you've had nice weeks, and let's get into the making of the thing. This is just the process I go through to match up my patterns, which I thought I would share with you in case it's helpful. I'm just doing the sleeve because that's one of the most important ones. The front of the bodice is what I'm just laying down here, and I'm making sure that as I lay the piece down right side up, because I'm actually cutting my fabric right side up on the table, is that all of the stripes on the top match up with the stripes on the fabric that I'm about to cut. And then what I'll do is line the pattern piece up with those stripes to make sure that everything lines up as far as it possibly can. The important points to match are the underarm join, which is what I'm just doing now, and making sure that those will line up and I've got enough space for the pattern piece. But then what I tend to do is make sure that my sleeve, when I lay it out, is going to line up as much as possible. So I'm lining up the front armhole of the bodice with the sleeve pattern piece and walking it around the seam edge, and I'm just using a pencil to mark on the pattern piece where the stripes fall. So because I know that the stripes on the fabric are lining up with the stripes on the bodice, it's just where the stripes on the fabric that I'm about to cut fall. Because if I've marked that on my pattern piece, then when I lay it out, I can make sure that they match up. And with any luck, that means that when I sew it together, I will have a far easier job of getting the stripes to go in the right place. So I'm just marking all of those down before I lay out my piece. So then I just lay my piece out and make sure that I've got all of those markings as far as I can to line up broadly with where they're supposed to be. Because it's a curve, you can't make it match all the way around, but you can do, the important points I think are that the front, the sort of bottom 3 or 4 inches of the curve, because that's where you will see the join on the front of your bodice, and ideally you want your stripes to line up across there so that you haven't got a disjoint. So I've lined all of those out, and I'm now just tracing around with a pen. I'm doing the same thing now with the bodice front and the neckband. So there's a 1 centimetre seam allowance on this pattern, so I'm marking that on my neckband pieces, as you can see here, and I'm making sure that my bodice front and the edge of where this neckband is going to attach to the bodice front, I have a clean line. So when I did my bodice front and cut it out, I made sure the centimetre seam allowance finished on the edge of a stripe, so that I can make sure that it lines up neatly. And so that's it about really cutting out the pieces. It's not too tricky. So this is the back bodice piece that I'm just laying out now. This fabric is incredibly curly. It doesn't tell you to do this in the pattern, but I'm adding clear elastic to my shoulder seams, which is something is recommended in the Agnes top, and just helps stop them stretch out, because it's one of the places in the top that tends to get yanked about a lot when you're putting it on and off. So you just cut a piece that's slightly longer than your shoulder seam on the back bodice piece, and when you sew the seam together, you just make sure that that's on the will be on the inside and on the back bodice piece. So you sandwich the elastic between your 2 seams essentially. So the first thing to do is do your shoulder seams. So you attach your front bodice and back bodice pieces at the shoulders, right sides together as you normally would. I didn't use an overlocker, I just used my sewing machine for this, and I just used a zigzag stitch, and it worked absolutely fine. So you want to pin your shoulder seams together and then sew them up, and use the clear elastic if you want to. It's just underneath my pattern here, so it's being pinned onto the back essentially. So the next thing to show you is the neckband. When you've cut your pieces out, you will end up with 2 sort of banner-shaped pieces of fabric. One that's short, which is this one, and then a longer one. And together those make up your neckband that you then use to create the nice square shape and to pull your neckline in so it doesn't gape. And you need to attach the short piece at both ends to the long piece, right sides together. But the pattern matching here is sort of important, because this is what creates your mitered corner. So I'm just showing you what I did. I marked the seam allowance at the point where the stripes are on my fabric. So I'm just using a seam gauge here and moving it along until the point where the 1 centimetre seam allowance hits that line, and I'm just marking it. And I'm doing that on the wrong side of one piece, because these are right sides together at the moment, and then I'm doing it on the corresponding right side of the other piece. The reason for this becomes clear in a second, but if you do this, it just means that you're getting your stripes to line up when you actually turn this through is a lot more straightforward. And this is just the way that I do it. There are probably many other mechanisms, so if you have one that works really well for you, then by all means use that. But I've now got 2 dots on that piece that I'm just pointing out. And what I do is I stick my pin straight through the dot on the upper piece, and then I separate them out and stick it straight down through the dot on the lower piece, and then I can manipulate the fabric a bit to make sure that those line up on top of each other. It just means that I always know I've hit both points exactly, and then I pin them in place. And do that on both sides of each stripe, so obviously there's one on the other side of this piece as well, to make sure that when I sew this together, my stripes aren't going to be out of line. And then once you've done that, you just sew along the seam in a V shape. You go straight down, pivot at the bottom, and straight up the other side. And what you end up with is your piece connected at both ends, and you've made essentially a loop, which hopefully you can see here. The next thing that you need to do is clip into your corners, because you're going to turn this through, and in order to allow the fabric not to pucker, you need to do this. So you just take scissors and snip as close to your stitching as you dare, and as close as you can really makes a big difference in terms of getting the corners nice and neat. I discovered I still haven't nailed this myself in this version, but it's a learning process. And if you turn it around, what you will see is that you've got these beautiful mitered corners from where your stripes have matched up along a diagonal seam, so you create this beautiful shape. And if you had a narrower stripe, you'd have several of them rather than just the big ones that I've got through on this fabric. So that's putting your neckband together, and you should now have a nice loop. And what you then need to do is turn it right sides
out, so wrong sides together. So fold it in half, wrong sides together as I'm doing here, so that all your raw edges are on the inside, and then press it all the way around so you end up with a nice flat piece that you're going to be able to attach to your front bodice. And this is what it looks like once it has been pressed. So you can start to see that this is the front line of your neckline, and it loops all the way around the back of your neck onto the back bodice, and that creates the nice shape at the front. And you can see that mine has this sort of brown stripe that runs all the way around, and the white outer line will all be encased in seam allowance. So this will be, the brown is where essentially the seams should start. So now you want to attach it, and this is the front bodice piece that I've got faced right sides up on the table. You want to unfold your neckband strip, because for this you need it flat. So the first thing it's worth doing is cleaning up the edges of your neckband seam. So where you've done your diagonal seam lines, just snipping off the excess seam allowance so you have a really clean corner. It makes everything a little bit simpler later on. It doesn't tell you to do this in the instructions, but I found the first time around it was a bit tough. So I'll just show you on the pattern where we are. It's step 3, I think, or 4 or something, but we're essentially attaching the neckband as it shows here. So right sides together, and what she explains is that you need to leave a certain distance on either side when you attach it. So I'm just going to show you that. So you've got your bodice front piece, which is right side up, and you want to use a seam gauge or similar measuring implement to mark out 2 centimetres and 1 centimetre from that corner point on your front bodice. And then what you need to do is pin your neckband right sides together so that the point at which you snipped into your neckband seam, so basically the deepest point of that V, lines up with the 1 centimetre mark that you made on your bodice top. So hopefully you can see that my pin roughly aligns with that middle snip on the neckline band. Don't worry too much about the 2 centimetre mark. I found that it moved around a lot. So then you need to pin the rest of your neckband, and I just found making a notch in the centre of both pieces really helped me with this. So I just clipped a notch in the centre of the neckband and the centre of my bodice piece so that I could line those up, because then you have to stretch your neckband across the piece in order to make it fit. Once you've sewn that, you'll have something that looks a little bit like this. So it's just attached by one side, the neckband, onto the front bodice, and you can see that my stripes have broadly lined up along the seam. And the next thing that you need to do is attach your bodice around, the neckband around the corners. So to do this, you need to clip into the bodice, so the front bodice, at the corner. You need to snip right to your stitch line that you've just made, which will allow you to then turn everything around the corner and pin it, as I'm showing here. And you just work your way all the way around the neckline, pinning everything together. You don't have to stretch it too much, but a little bit helps just to make sure that it all pulls together. And then what you will have is your sewn neckband, which is attached all the way around your bodice, like so. This is right side up at the moment, which hopefully you can see. On the back, you need to neaten up all of your edges. So what you have to do is fold your neckband in half and use the width of it to basically cover the back edge so that it's nice and neat. So you've got your corner piece, and you want to fold it in half, wrong sides together, so that your corners line up on your neckband piece and you get a nice neat clean finish. Because once you've done that, you start at your corners so you get them all lined up, and then you essentially want to do exactly the same thing all the way around the edge of the neckband. So you flatten out all of your seam allowances and pin your neckband to the inside so you get a nice clean edge. And once you've done that, it will all start to flatten out. And then what you need to do is basically sew all of your seam allowances together. Using an overlocker would be great because it would get a really nice clean finish. I just zigzag stitched it, but you're only stitching the seam allowance. Don't stitch your actual thing. And it just means that you end up with a clean line around the inside of the neckline on the inside of the garment. So this is what it looks like once it's done. You can see this is the inside, and it's now looking nice and neat and finished. And on the outside, you've got a nice, clean, lovely, soft edge to your neckband. Now that is by far the most difficult thing of this pattern, and it's tricky to explain, but hopefully that's clear. The next stage is to attach your sleeves, and if you've ever done stretch tops, you will know how to do this. It's very straightforward, but you put your sleeve right sides together with your bodice top, match your shoulder seam, and then match the underarm seams. But at this point, you need to be making sure that you're lining up your stripes. It should be easy because you did it when you cut out the pieces to make sure this would line up, and I found mine were a cinch to do after I'd done that. There wasn't really any places where it was tricky. They won't line up all the way around. It is a curve. You can't get it absolutely perfect all the way through, but you can do a pretty decent job of it. So you want to keep going around and just attach it flat. It requires you to manoeuvre the sleeve a bit because you need to go around both sides, and you're going kind of the wrong way around a curve when you do it like this. But persevere, and it gets there. And actually, it's a really nice, simple way to attach sleeves. I much prefer this to setting them in once they've already been sewn and you've already sewn your shoulder seam. But it's easier to do with stretch fabric because you've got a bit more manoeuvrability than you would have in a woven garment. So you go all the way around your seam line, matching everything up, and you will end up with your sleeves attaching. So this is what I mean by you have to move the sleeve around and start from the other side, so that the sleeve will be lying flat across your bodice piece. So the bulk of the sleeve is across your garment, and make sure that's the case, because if it's the other way and the sleeve is pointing out as it would when you wear it, it's the wrong way around. So you just want to keep going and make sure that you've got your sleeves on, and then you can sew them. Once you've done that, you will end up with something that looks a little bit like this. And the final stage is to sew a continuous seam all the way from, well, sorry, I'm just showing that all the stripes are matching up on my on my seam lines, prove that it works. So you've got one long seam now to sew all the way down the arm, pivot at the underarm point, and then go all the way down the side seam. And then you just need to hem it, and it's done. I actually hemmed this before I did this seam, so I hemmed all of my pieces first, and then I did the side seam and underarm seam, just because it seemed to be a little bit easier than having to do it when it was all in a circle. But you can do either, it works fine. And that's the end.